We are heading back up the ICW towards North Carolina from Florida, and we've had a couple of examples of bad luck. We've had a run of bad weather that has really slowed us down, and then another thing that happened the other day is that our windlass finally died. Whitetail's windlass is original to the boat, so it's 20 years old. It's a Simpson Lawrence Horizon Express, so those of you who've heard of Simpson Lawrence know that they no longer exist. They were acquired by Lewmar, and it's very hard to get parts for the Horizon Express. It's difficult to find any parts any longer. There is a company in Scotland, but for that reason we're going to replace the windlass. The windlass, if you don't know, is a special motorized winch that lifts the anchor chain when we are anchoring. So it's essential for us because we anchor most nights and we can't do that without a windlass. So we pulled into a marina, one that we know in Georgia. We're going to stay here hopefully for a week. We've ordered a new windlass. I went on to the Beneteau 423 owners forum, and based on some feedback there and from some comments from other owners, we've selected a Lewmar H2 windlass. It's kind of the successor to the old Horizon Express, so I'm hoping that there'll be enough similarities between what we had before and what we're getting next to make the job maybe just a little easier than it might otherwise be. So far all I've done is take off the anchor, take out the chain out of the anchor locker, and clean out the anchor locker, because that's where I'm going to be working. We'll hopefully receive the new windlass tomorrow and I can start installing it, but today I'm going to remove the old Horizon Express, which has given 20 years of solid service. I have to say, 20 years of service, and you know, it didn't let us down the whole time we were in the Bahamas. If it was going to die anywhere, then I guess this is the most convenient place, because we're back in the States, we can get a new winch, we don't have to get it flown in on a special flight or anything, so that's good. Here goes.
If there's a worse place to be on a boat than the anchor locker, I haven't found it. Here we are in the anchor locker. I'm going to try and show you what I'm dealing with here. You can see underneath these two bolts hold the old windlass at the front, and there are some bolts back there holding it at the back. This is the throat through which the chain falls into this anchor locker. This hose carries the power cables for the windlass, and sorry about that shake there. This wire here is just goes up to the connection on the outside of the boat for the remote control. While we're down here in the anchor locker, you can see up there, those are the through bolts for the deck cleats, and those are the same ones on the port side, starboard side. I'm looking aft right now. So that's what's down here. It's extremely uncomfortable and claustrophobic, and I would encourage everybody, do not come into the anchor locker without telling someone that's where you're going, because you don't want to get stuck in here.
Before doing anything else, I need to make sure that my breaker is turned off for the windlass. The Simpson Lawrence Horizon Express had this 80 amp breaker. I believe that the new windlass has a 90 amp one. Anyway, I'm turning this one off before I go any further. So using just a 17mm socket, I was able to get those four fasteners undone. In the case of 3 of them, the washer and the nut came off. In the case of the 4th, the bolt actually, I guess, unscrewed out of the base of the windlass. Unfortunately, that hasn't freed it off. I was afraid that these were going to be covered in lashings of adhesive. They weren't. But maybe the windlass itself is secured with adhesive, which will make this a lot more difficult. We shall find out. Well, these are the original installation instructions, and it says right here in boldface, do not use a permanent adhesive or sealant. So, we'll see, I guess.
So the instructions say don't use permanent adhesive, but something's adhered somewhere. I've undone every visible fastening, so I'm using a bit of what my father would have called brute force and ignorance, and it seems to be slowly budging, so we'll see. Well, there's the windlass. It's up off the deck, upside down there, as you can see. I had to snip the power cords because the power cords just come straight out of the unit. There's no connector. That's the condition of the deck. Underneath you can see here like a foam gasket or something. This is, I think, some kind of debris from degrading paint or whatever that powder coat is. You can look down the chain throat and the cable pass through and the 4 stud holes.
Down here in the anchor locker you can see the connector for the hose. You can see the hose that protects the cable and where that passes through into the body of the vessel, and you can see the wire that goes to the remote connector. This wiring is kind of infamous among the 423 community. It's not particularly great from Beneteau. It's not very accessible. It's actually pretty. It's not very good wire for such a high current application. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to do about all of this. We'll see when the new one gets here, I suppose. The next job is just to clean up a bit and get ready for the new hole pattern. So I've scraped away the old gasket and a lot of muck. To my surprise, this throat or pass through for the wire, it's got some relief to it. I don't know if it's supposed to be flush with the deck. I don't know if it was before I pulled the windlass up, but it's not now. I don't know exactly what that bodes for this project. I don't know if I don't know really. I've got to look at the footprint of the new windlass anyway to see how much of this, if any of it, lines up. It could be that none of this lines up. But this in particular is a concern because it's no longer a flush surface, and I don't know if that's a problem. I'll show you on the windlass where that fitted. Here's the windlass out here on the dock. And now I've flipped it over, you can see this cavity here is where that raised part on the deck must have sat. I don't know if this was poured in after the fact, after installation, in order to make the two things conform. Kind of weird. And there's the plate underneath with the serial number. And there it is after a cleanup with Goo Gone. It's looking a lot cleaner. Now I need to go and study the installation instructions for the new windlass, the Lewmar H2 that's going in place of this old Simpson Lawrence Horizon Express. Having looked some more at the instructions for the old Horizon Express and also for the new windlass, I suspect that this lump here with the pass-through for the old power cords was actually a part of the Horizon Express that's been left behind on the deck. So I'm probably just going to scrape that off. Okay, a quick scrape and the clean with some Goo Gone, and I've got a nice flat clean surface for tomorrow's work. Okay, the box has come from Defender. Let's see what we bought. Is it a windlass or did we accidentally order a box full of puppies and kittens? Okay, so that's what was in the box, apart from huge amounts of packaging. I've got a rocker switch. Probably not going to install that because I'm going to use the remote I already own. I've got a 90 amp breaker to replace the current 60 amp breaker. I've got assorted studs and bolts and washers. I've got the windlass itself, which looks pretty nice. I've currently got it on its side because
you can see coming out of the bottom you've got this guard and then the wiring, so I can't put that on its base right now without damaging it. I've got a foam gasket and an instruction manual here, and then most important of all, I guess, I've got the one-to-one printout of the footprint of the device that I can use to drill the holes in the deck. So that's what came in the box. Before this was all delivered, I was looking at the PDF installation manual from the manufacturer and the PDF of the footprint to try and get a sense of how this was going to go. They recommended a half-inch drill bit for these through bolts, and if I compare that with the gasket, that looks about right. And they recommended a 2-inch drill for the pass-through, the cable pass-through, and that looks spot on. So that all looks as though it's going to work just fine. Looking at the windlass itself, this bundle of wires coming off down here I think is for the chain counter. This unit is compatible with a digital chain counter, which we're not going to use. That must be what that's for. And in here I'm expecting to find the wiring for positive 12 volts DC, negative 12 volts DC, and also a cord with 3 wires in there for the remote control. Let's have a look and see what's in there. Well, no surprises. Positive 12, negative 12, and the 3 wire for the remote control. You can see that this is in 4 AWG. For people who are concerned, there's a lot of concern online about that, but this is 4 AWG from the manufacturer with crimps already on, which is nice. Don't know if this is going to be long enough though. I don't know how far I'm going to be able to route this cable. So I've overlaid the footprint diagram onto my deck. You can see this is the previous hole that was presumably made by Beneteau in South Carolina. That was the previous hole, and I've cut out in the mask the hole that's required by this windlass and aligned them so I can see how it's all looking. I think it's looking fine. I will say this mask is kind of this paper chart. It's kind of beaten up, and I'm disappointed about that. This is a very important part of the installation. It was protected in the box, but it's beaten up nevertheless. There are tears and wear patches. I really need to get this right, and I wish it was in a better shape. Okay, so it looks as though it's going to fit in a 2-dimensional sense pretty well. I do not have the optional optional drum. I've just got the chain windlass. If you had the optional drum, I guess it looks as if it would fit in the footprint, but I don't know how it would be for height here. Similarly, I've got the standard fitting on this side. I don't have the manual recovery mechanism, and again, the footprint looks as though it would accommodate that if you went ahead and purchased that, which I did not. So the next thing I'm going to do is I guess I'm going to start drilling. I'm going to tape this down and start drilling. What I would like to do is put the windlass on here and check it for height before I drill anything, but I can't because I need this hole for the cable pass-through to exist first so that the windlass will sit down there. So I'm just going to have to bite the bullet, I guess. Well, I've got my pilot holes drilled for the studs. I've also got the 2-inch piece removed for the cable pass. And so this is my first opportunity to put the thing where it's going to go and make sure this isn't some horrendous debacle. So let's see if it fits. Okay, well, I dropped the windlass onto the deck with the cable pass-through sitting in the new hole that I've just drilled for it, the 2-inch hole, and it seems fine. It seems to look well lined up. I haven't put the studs in yet. I'm just checking it for the fit. If I stand up, you might get a better view, and you can see the lid does close. Let's see what it's like inside. Okay, and this is the view inside the anchor locker.
not a place I normally spend time when the lid is closed. You can see that I can get my hand between the windlass and the lid, even at the back. There's no contact, no rubbing. There's plenty of space here, I guess, for where the capstan would go if you had one of those, or the manual recovery if you had one of those. And underneath here, you can see the wiring comes through. This is, again, the wire for the chain counter that we don't have. And then this little wire is just going to go back to here, which is where the remote connects. And these two big wires, they're actually going to go, they're going to be routed where this tube is, and they will actually reach through. They're going to get through inside the boat, so that's something at least. So that's the view from inside. It fits. Now, will my husband let me out of here when I ask?
So I went ahead and drilled out the 4 bolt holes from the pattern once I'd got confirmation that the wire conduit was nicely lined up. You can see that I've gone with the drill bit size they recommended, and there's plenty of play in the hole, so it's not going to be super critical if I've made a small alignment mistake with the mask. I don't think I have, but I appreciate them making my life a little easier. That's good. Before going any further, I've just plugged up the old holes with some Sudbury elastomeric marine sealant. It's not an adhesive, it's a sealant, and that's just to prevent any water ingress. I don't think it's critical, but this would be the time to do it, right? It looks like we're going to get some thunderstorms, so I've moved back here to the cockpit, where I'm just driving the studs into the base, which was the next step anyway. So I peeled the backing off the self-adhesive mat and I threaded it over the cords, and I'm just pressing it to the base now so that we'll have a nice gasket there. Well, it finally stopped raining, so we're back on the foredeck with the windlass, ready to start installing. The directions from Lewmar also suggest lining the new through holes with some kind of sealant, which I've done using a straw. So all of the new holes have a nice sleeve of sealant just to protect the boat. The windlass drops straight back onto its footprint. Even though the studs are on and the rubber gasket is installed, it just drops straight in. No big problem lining it up, so that's a relief. The windlass is mounted and it's bolted underneath. So that is the mechanical part of this process concluded. What remains to be done is I've got to secure this somewhere. I'm not going to be using it. I've got to connect this to the gland back there, and I've got to route these through here. But that is all for tomorrow. Today I just wanted to get the mechanical part done, and it's done despite the rain, so I'm pretty happy. I think it looks great. I'll feel a lot better when I see it running. Here we are inside the V-berth, and I've pulled the red and black power cables through, so those are now in here. The grey cable is still here because it's still attached to the gland in the anchor locker, where I'm going to go now. Okay, so those old power cables, I pulled them through there. That grey one I'm going to have to snip from up here, where it's currently on the connector for the remote control. So the 3 cords, the positive, negative and the control wire, I've managed to get them into the hose. The control wire I've popped out of the same hole in the side that was used previously. That can then run up to the little gland up there. I can do that later in a few minutes. And then the
the power cords run down through the hose, and I've been able to get them through this connection here into the forward cabin, where they'll connect to the power there. All of that seems good. What's less good is that this hose used to clamp onto a gland that passed down through the deck. Now that's actually on the new windlass, that's actually recessed, and I think it's a different diameter. I don't think this is going to go on there. I wish I'd realised that before I put the thread locker on here. I am not sure if that's a problem or not. There shouldn't really be any water coming down from here, because that is the inside of the windlass. So I'm unsure if that's a problem. I might simply slide this tube up for now and come back to this problem when I reach my home port in a few weeks. Right now I'm extemporizing a little because we are away from the home port, and I need to get moving. So anyway, that's how the wiring's looking in here.
So this is the old gland for the wired remote control. You can see the cables at the back are kind of gunked in place. That would have been difficult to work with. Fortunately, I happen to have a spare one that came with my... I recently had to replace the remote anyway, and it came with a gland. So I've got a nice new gland. I've wired the wires into the back of that. I'm actually not going to screw or seal this in place yet. The color scheme, in my opinion, is kind of funky, and so I'm not super confident that I've got the right wires on the right pins. Until I test it, I'm just going to leave it like this. Let's go inside. We are back inside the master cabin. You can see here the two power cords that I've just shoved through from the other side. You can see here the two old power cords that I had to snip yesterday at the just under the base of the windlass. Those were previously just butt spliced into the power coming out of the solenoid. Speaking of the solenoid, you can see this is the grey remote control wire that I just snipped up there and pushed down through. That's not going to be used anymore because the new windlass doesn't have an external solenoid, it's internal. So all I need to do now is connect these two power cords to boat power, which is coming up under the V-berth, under the bunk here. All I need to do is connect them to boat power and we're done. Just got to think about how I'm going to do that. For those who are interested, Beneteau had 2-aught going to the old solenoid. Then they had 8 AWG coming out of the solenoid to this tube here. Inside this tube here, that 8 was butt spliced to this wire here, which is unmarked. I don't know what AWG this is, but it's even smaller than the 8. And this is what was hardwired into the windlass. Presumably Simpson Lawrence, they spec'd this wire, which is even smaller than the 8 that Beneteau has running from the solenoid up to this point, which is in turn smaller than the 2-aught, of course, that they had running into the solenoid. So those are the gauges they had. And on this new wire, this is 4. This is AWG 4 that comes with the new Lewmar. Here we are in the master cabin underneath the bunk. This is the old Simpson Lawrence solenoid that was responsible for giving the windlass the ability to go both up and down, both directions. The new windlass, the Lewmar H2, has an internal solenoid. This is now redundant. All I need to do is bypass it. This is the 2-aught cable that Beneteau provided, bringing power in from the battery. All I need to do is connect that to the cable that came with the new Windlass, bypassing this completely. So that's what I'm going to do. Not super difficult.
Here you can see how I've extended the wire that comes in from the Windlass, which is only 3 feet long, so that it connects with the existing boat wiring for the Windlass, having bypassed the solenoid.
Okay, so the breaker is on. The solenoid has been bypassed. The power cables have been connected by extending from the old solenoid onto the new 3-foot cables that came attached to the new Windlass, and the remote control is wired up through the gland over there using its 3 control wires. So let's see, if I press the magic button for up, there we have it. And if I press the button for down, there we have it. We have operation in both directions as desired. It looks pretty nice. So unfortunately I am getting some misfeeds when I bring the chain up like that. I think that the hole is, the throat is just not quite big enough, so I'm gonna have to go and rent some kind of a saw to enlarge that hole tomorrow. Well, with that unexpected problem, I've dismounted the Windlass again, which required me to unhook all the wiring, of course, because that all goes inside the boat. And before I did that, I drew around the outline of the aperture in the Windlass, so I know what I have to remove. We rented a jigsaw from Home Depot and used that to enlarge the choke. This is the throat. This is the piece I've removed, and you can see how much bigger the throat is now. And having used that jigsaw, you can see that the throat is now at least as wide as the metal ring attached to the Windlass itself. So nothing is now going to foul the chain. Apart from widening the throat, the other thing that I've done is underneath, since I had to go to the hardware store anyway, I found a way of closing this up. So that's nice. Everything's wired up again. Everything's bolted in again. So if I do my directional test, up is up and down is down. So that part seems happy. Okay, so I've got the chain engaged with the Gypsy. How does it feed? Well, I think it feeds just fine. Time to reload the anchor rod. So there it is, the new Windlass is installed and in place. I've loaded the chain and the anchor, 250 feet of BBB in 3/8. The new Windlass did just fine, hauling it all up, no problem. I've washed it all down and we're ready to get underway again. Thank goodness.